April 12th, 1961. We are high above the African continent, and we are descending fast. The vehicle is the Vostok 1. It is basically a spherical metal ball, maybe 2.3 meters in diameter, and right now, it is completely engulfed in plasma. The temperature outside that window is pushing 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It is glowing. But the heat is not even the main problem. The problem is the spin. It is not a gentle rotation. It is a violent, unpredictable gyration, a tumbling. Inside, the pilot is being subjected to G-forces that are fluctuating wildly, peaking at around 8 to 10 Gs. Understand what that means. 10 Gs means your body feels 10 times heavier than it actually is. Your own blood becomes as heavy as mercury, and it is being pulled away from your brain. Your vision starts to gray out. It is a blackout waiting to happen. The pilot is a 27-year-old former foundry worker, Yuri Gagarin, and he is not panicking. He is not screaming into the radio for help. He is calculating. He knows exactly why he is spinning. He knows the service module, the engine block of the spacecraft, failed to separate. They are still tethered together by a bundle of thick cables that refuse to cut. He is effectively dragging a massive dead anchor through the atmosphere at hypersonic speeds. It is throwing off the whole aerodynamic balance. This is the defining moment of his life. We always see the pictures of Gagarin with that million-watt smile, the chest full of medals, the perfect orange suit, the poster boy. But in this moment, he is literally being cooked and centrifuged at the same time. He knows that if the heat of re-entry doesn't burn through those cables and soon, the sheer force of the atmosphere will tear the ship apart and he will die. It is a survival story. That is the only way to look at it. We are going to look at the life of Yuri Gagarin, not just as a technological achievement for the Soviet Union, but as the visceral struggle of a man forged in the fire of World War II, launched into the absolute void of space, and then crushed by the weight of becoming an icon. We focus on those 108 minutes he spent in orbit, but the 34 years he spent on Earth were just as turbulent. Gagarin conquered space, but he could not survive the politics and the fame back on the ground. Before we descend further into this story, welcome to History Titans. If you want to join us on these journeys into the past, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel right now. Let's keep history alive. Now, let's start at the very beginning. To understand why he didn't panic in that spinning ball of fire, you have to understand where he came from. Humble beginnings does not even begin to cover it. The first cosmonauts were selected to be representatives of the new Soviet man. But Gagarin's background was almost a caricature of poverty. He was born March 9th, 1934, in a tiny village called Klushino, in the Smolensk region out in western Russia. His father, Alexei, was a carpenter, a skilled man but stern and traditional. His mother, Anna, was a dairy farmer, but she was a voracious reader. She instilled a hunger for knowledge in her children. But the defining event of his childhood wasn't school. It was the invasion. Operation Barbarossa. The Nazi invasion of the Soviet Union reached their tiny village of Klushino in late 1941. Yuri was just 7 years old. The story shifts here from a biography into a survival horror film. The Germans did not just occupy the village. They took over the Gagarin family home. A Bavarian officer literally moved into their house and kicked them out. Where did the family go? They couldn't leave town. They were forced to build a dugout in the garden, right behind their own house. This wasn't a cabin. It was a hole in the mud. The dimensions were roughly 3 meters by 3 meters. No floor to stamp down frozen earth. Initially, no chimney. Smoke from the stove filled the space. 6 people lived in a 9-square-meter mud pit. His father, his mother, and 4 children. They lived there for 21 months, through 2 full Russian winters. It is unfathomable. The enemy was living in your home, eating your food, sleeping in your beds, while you were literally freezing in a hole in your own backyard. It had a profound physical effect. Gagarin was only 1.57 meters, about 5'2". That short stature was a direct result of malnutrition during these critical developmental years. It stunted his physical growth, but it absolutely calcified his will. There are reports of 7-year-old Yuri engaging in acts of sabotage. He and his younger brother Boris were actively messing with German military equipment. The most famous story involves potatoes. They would sneak up to the German staff cars at night and shove raw potatoes deep into the exhaust pipes. The stakes were not getting grounded. The stakes were summary execution. If a German soldier had caught them, they would have been shot against the wall of their own house. It shows a complete lack of fear. He was willing to gamble his life against authority from the very beginning. And it got worse. There was a specific incident with his younger brother Boris. A German soldier, annoyed by the children, or perhaps just purely sadistic, decided to hang little Boris from an apple tree using the boy's own scarf. Yuri witnessed the whole thing. The parents heard the commotion and rushed out begging, pleading. They managed to cut Boris down just before he suffocated. Imagine the trauma. Seeing your little brother swinging from a tree rewires a brain. On top of that, his 2 older siblings, Valentin and Zoya, were rounded up, deported to Poland as slave labor. The family had no idea if they were alive or dead until the war ended in 1945. By the time he is a teenager, he has seen more horror than most people see in a lifetime. But the war also gave him his first glimpse of his future. It wasn't a passenger plane, it was combat. A Soviet Yak fighter plane either made a forced landing near the village, or he witnessed a dogfight overhead between a Yak and German Messerschmitts. He saw the downed Soviet pilot, he saw the machine, the uniform, the medals. For a boy living in the mud, that pilot represented everything. Power, agency, the ability to rise above the misery. That was the spark. The war finally ends. The Gagarins survive. They move to a nearby town called Gazotsk. They did not just move, they moved their house. Literally. They dismantled their wooden house board by board, numbered the pieces, and reassembled it in the new town. This emphasizes the value of material goods in post-war Russia. Nothing, absolutely nothing. Yuri eventually leaves for trade school, but he does not become a pilot right away. He becomes a foundryman first, a molder, working with molten steel in a massive plant. This is a crucial part of his identity. He wasn't an aristocrat's son fast-tracked into an elite military academy. He went to a vocational school. He spent years maneuvering huge, heavy ladles of liquid metal. This brutal physical labor does 2 things for him. First, it builds incredible upper body strength and physical endurance, which he would need later to handle the G-forces in the Vostok. Secondly, and maybe more importantly, it gave him the worker credential. In the Soviet Union, being a member of the proletariat, a man who actually worked with his hands and with steel, was political gold. He wasn't an intellectual elitist from Moscow. He was a man of steel, literally, but he is moonlighting. Working in the foundry during the day, he joins the local aero club in Saratov. These were paramilitary volunteer organizations, the Soviet way of creating a massive reserve of pilots without the full expense of a formal military program. Yuri starts flying little Yak trainer planes. He is good, a natural. He has a feel for the air. He loves it. This gets him noticed and leads to him being drafted into the Orenburg Military Pilot School in 1955. He is on the path, but this is also where he almost washes out. The first man in space almost got kicked out of flight school. It came down to one thing: landing. He was flying the MiG-15 jet, a powerful swept-wing jet fighter, a beast. But it has a very high angle of attack when landing. The nose points way up, obscuring the runway. A taller pilot could see, but Yuri was short. Despite being a brilliant student in aerodynamics and navigation, he botched the approach every time. He kept coming in too hard or too shallow because he couldn't see the ground over the nose of the jet. The school commander was ready to dismiss him. They told him he was smart, but he couldn't fly safely. That seems like a massive design flaw, to exclude capable pilots because of their height. But that was standard military thinking. The pilot fits the machine. But his flight instructor saw persistence in Gagarin, a tenacity. In a move almost comical in its simplicity, they gave him a cushion, a pillow to sit on. That extra 3 or 4 inches was all he needed. He nailed the very next landing, The rest is history. But think about the irony. The very thing, his height, that nearly killed his career as a MiG-15 pilot, Sir became his single greatest asset for getting into the Vostok program. The Vostok capsule was tiny, claustrophobically small. The chief designer, Sergei Korolev, and his engineers were fighting for every single gram of weight. A smaller, lighter capsule means a smaller rocket. They explicitly looked for pilots who were short and light. If Gagarin had been 6 feet tall, he never would have been considered. His biggest weakness becomes his biggest strength. We move to 1960. The space race is in full swing. The Soviet Union secretly looks for their first group of cosmonauts, the Vanguard. They whittle down hundreds of pilots to just 20, then to an elite 6, the Sochi 6. From that group, it becomes a two-horse race. Yuri Gagarin versus German Titov. By all counts, they were best friends, always number 1 and number 2 in every metric. But they were polar opposites. Titov was the son of a schoolteacher. Well-read, reciting poetry, introspective, intellectual. A definite middle-class, educated vibe. Gagarin is the charismatic foundry worker with a winning smile. The Gagarin smile. It wasn't just a facial expression. It was a weapon of soft power. Khrushchev, the Soviet premier, personally reviewed the photos and files. He saw Gagarin, the peasant background, the easy charm, that quintessential Russian face, and decided this is the face of the Soviet Union. Titov was seen as maybe a bit too refined, a bit too bourgeois for the role of the first socialist man in space. The most telling part of the selection process was the vote. The commanders asked the 20 original candidates to vote anonymously. If you cannot be the first to fly, who do you think should be? 17 of them wrote down Gagarin's name, 17 out of 19. Titov wasn't necessarily arrogant, but he was competitive, a lone wolf. Gagarin was a helper. During the most grueling tests, Gagarin was cracking jokes, helping others, keeping morale up. He wanted to win, but he didn't feel the need to destroy everyone else to do it. He gets the nod. April 1961. The Americans are close. Alan Shepard is preparing for his suborbital launch. The Soviets rush the Vostok to the launch pad at Baikonur. The pressure is immense. The prototype Vostok launches had been a disaster. Of the 7 unmanned test flights before Gagarin's, almost half failed catastrophically. Some exploded, some went off course, some killed the dogs on board. The success rate was essentially a coin flip, 50-50. Imagine sitting on top of a modified ICBM, knowing there is a coin flip chance you are about to be vaporized. Yet, on the morning of April 12th, Gagarin and his backup, Titov, wake up, do calisthenics, have breakfast. Gagarin is unbelievably calm. His heart rate is a baseline 64 beats per minute. Totally relaxed. But there was a moment on the launch pad where the tension spiked. He is strapped in, the elevator goes down, and a light in the control room doesn't turn on. The hatch sensor. The Vostok hatch was secured by 30 explosive bolts. The control room didn't get the sealed signal. If that hatch isn't perfectly sealed, you die in the vacuum of space. Panic mode for the engineers. For Sergei Korolev, it was his worst nightmare. He screams at technicians to rush back up the gantry, unscrew all 30 bolts by hand, jiggle the sensor, and screw them back in, all while the clock is ticking down. And Gagarin. He starts whistling a patriotic song called "The Motherland Hears, the Motherland Knows." He projects an aura of utter tranquility, mostly to calm Korolev and the engineers down. He knew they were more stressed out than he was. And then finally, ignition. 9:07 a.m., Moscow time. The R-7 rocket lights up the Kazakh steppe. Let us not forget what this machine was. It was an intercontinental ballistic missile designed to nuke America. And in that moment of fire, Gagarin shouts one iconic word, "Poyakali." It translates roughly to, "Let's go." But in Russian, it is much more casual. It is the kind of thing you say when you start a car ride with friends or before you toss back a shot of vodka. Off we go. It was not a formal statement. It was spontaneous. It was human. And it instantly humanized this terrifying piece of technology. The ascent is violent, but it is successful. He enters orbit. And for the first time in the 4.5 billion year history of this planet, a human consciousness is looking at it from the outside. The Earth is blue. How pretty. That was his first reaction. Simple, no poetry, just pure childlike aesthetic appreciation. But he had work to do. He was not just a passenger. He had to test basic human functions. He had to eat and drink. This sounds trivial now, but back then, scientists legitimately did not know if the esophagus would work in zero gravity. They were worried the water might float in his mouth and he could drown. So he squeezed meat paste into his mouth from a tube. He proved you could swallow. And then, in his notepad, famously floated away because he forgot to secure it with the Velcro. That was lesson number 1 of spaceflight. Tie everything down. Now, let us address the controversy, the religious aspect. Did he actually say, "I see no God up here"? No. We have the full transcripts. We have the audio recordings. He never said that. That line was completely manufactured later by Nikita Khrushchev in a public anti-religious speech. The propaganda machine ran with it and attributed the quote to Gagarin. But the reality is, Yuri was baptized in the Russian Orthodox Church. His mother was deeply religious. Later in his life, he actually advocated for the restoration of the Cathedral of Christ the Savior in Moscow. He was not a militant atheist. He was likely a quiet believer. The orbit is a triumph, but getting up is the easy part. It is getting down where physics tries to kill you. This brings us back to the Vostok 1 re-entry. The ship was designed to be fully automated. Gagarin had no control. The manual controls were physically locked behind a sealed envelope with a 3-digit code inside. The psychologists were terrified that exposure to space would cause space madness, and the pilot might try to crash the ship, or even defect. Defect to where? The moon. It is paranoid. Cold War logic. But that was their thinking. The automatic system initiated the retro fire sequence. The engine fired perfectly. But then, the service module failed to separate from the capsule. 4 explosive bolts were supposed to fire, severing the metal straps. They didn't. The ball is now weighted so that its heavy heat shield faces forward. It is designed to be stable. But with the massive service module still dangling off the back by a thick umbilical of data cables, the center of gravity is thrown off. The aerodynamics are ruined. Instead of falling shield first, he is tumbling end over end. He is in a violent spin. Gagarin estimated it was rotating at about 30 degrees per second. He is looking out his porthole. Earth, black sky. Earth, black sky. Then the plasma starts to build up. The friction creates a sheath of ionized gas, bright purple and red. It is blinding. Because of the spin, the G-forces are yanking him from side to side. He is pulling upwards of 10 Gs. He cannot lift his arms. His vision is tunneling down to a pinpoint. He could not use the emergency override. It wasn't a piloting problem. It was a mechanical failure. He just had to wait. He reasoned with incredible clarity that the intense heat of re-entry would eventually burn through the cables holding the 2 modules together. That is a terrifying calculation. I am currently on fire, but my only hope is that this specific wire burns up before the rest of me does. And it did. After about 10 agonizing minutes of this spin, he heard a massive crack. The cable snapped. The descent module, now free, immediately self-oriented. The spin stopped. He was alive, but he does not land in the capsule. This is the great Soviet lie of the mission. The Vostok was a rush job. They hadn't perfected the soft landing system. It would have hit the Earth, like a car crashing into a brick wall, so their solution was ejection. At 7,000 meters, about 23,000 feet up, the hatch was blown off. Gagarin's entire seat fired out of the capsule. He parachuted the last few miles to the ground. But the Fédération Aéronautique Internationale, the world body that certifies records, had rules. For a spaceflight record to be valid, the pilot must land with their spacecraft. So the Soviets lied. They lied for years. They claimed he landed safely inside the capsule. Gagarin himself had to lie at press conferences all over the world. It was a huge burden. It wasn't until 1971 that they finally admitted the truth. He lands in a field near the Volga River, near a tiny village called Smolovka. A local peasant woman, Anna Toktarova and her young granddaughter are weeding potatoes. They hear a loud boom. They look up and see a monster in a bizarre bright orange suit and a massive white helmet dragging a parachute. They start running away. They think he is an alien or a NATO spy. Gagarin has to quickly unclip his helmet. He shouts to them, "Don't be afraid. I am a friend, comrades. I am a Soviet citizen who has flown from space." Even in the middle of a potato field, after surviving re-entry, he keeps the party line. He asks for a telephone. Within hours, he is plucked from that field and thrust directly onto the world stage. This transitions us to the most difficult phase of his life, the victory lap. The level of global fame is hard to comprehend. We have celebrities today, but Gagarin was arguably the most famous human being on the planet in 1961. He was the first. It is a category of one. He completely transcended the Cold War. He went on a world tour. He visited the UK, Canada, Brazil, Egypt, Japan. He was mobbed everywhere he went. In London, the crowds were so large, the police lost control of the streets. He was waving from open-top convertibles like a king. There is that famous story about his visit with Queen Elizabeth II. He was invited to lunch at Buckingham Palace. Picture this collision of worlds. The ultimate symbol of ancient hereditary monarchy meets the ultimate symbol of communist progress. The peasant boy who touched the stars, and he runs into the cutlery issue. Gagarin sits down at this massive table, and there is a forest of silverware. Forks for salad, forks for fish, forks for the main course, spoons for everything. He freezes. He has no idea what to do. So he leans over to the Queen and says with disarming honesty, "Your Majesty, I grew up in a small village. I don't know which fork to use." The Queen's response is perfect. She leans over and whispers to him, "My dear, I was born in this palace, and I still don't know which ones to use. I just take the ones they give me." It broke the ice. Later, at the end of tea, Gagarin plucks the lemon slice out of his cup and eats it. A huge breach of royal etiquette. You do not eat the garnish at Buckingham Palace. But the Queen, seeing him do this, fishes her own lemon slice out of her cup and eats it too. She validated him. The stories say she even touched his leg under the table just to check if he was real. He was seen as a superhuman figure, but he was not superhuman. And that pressure, that fame, began to crush him. The Soviet government realized they had a priceless propaganda asset. And what do you do with a priceless asset? You lock it in a safe. They put him in a golden cage. They grounded him. They forbade him from flying solo jets, or they forbade him from training for another space mission. He was too valuable to risk. His life became an endless parade of banquets and factories, where he was forced to drink toast after toast of vodka with party officials. He felt like a prop. He told friends he felt like a museum piece. He started to gain weight. He started drinking heavily to cope with the crushing boredom and frustration. He was a pilot. That was his identity. And he was not allowed to fly. For a man like that, it is a kind of spiritual death. This leads to the darker episodes. His marriage to his wife, Valentina, became strained. And then there was the incident in Crimea. This story is often left out of the sanitized biographies. September 1961. Less than 6 months after his historic flight, he is at a Black Sea resort sanatorium. He gets very drunk, or he ends up in a hotel room with a young nurse named Anna. His wife, Valentina, finds out and comes knocking on the door. Gagarin panicked. To avoid being caught, he tried to jump from the second-floor balcony down to the ground, but his foot caught on a vine or a piece of the railing. He face-planted directly into the concrete below. He fractured his skull. He cracked his skull open and permanently severed a nerve over his eye. He was in the hospital for a month. The official Soviet press said he had a minor household accident. But if you look closely at photos of Gagarin from 1962 onwards, you can always see a small pale scar just above his left eyebrow. He often tilted his cap to hide it. That scar is the physical manifestation of his struggle with fame. But he did not stay down. He could have become a bureaucrat. or drunk himself to death. But he fought tooth and nail to get back into the cockpit. He sobered up. He got back into peak physical shape. He started studying again. By the mid-1960s, he had fought his way back into the space program and was assigned as an active cosmonaut in the new Soyuz program. He was determined to go back to space, but this put him on a collision course with the Soyuz 1 disaster. The Soyuz 1 spacecraft was a death trap. The engineers had found over 200 structural defects before the scheduled launch, 203 to be exact. But the launch date was politically motivated. It was set to coincide with Lenin's birthday. Brezhnev wanted a space spectacular. The primary pilot was Vladimir Komarov. Gagarin was his backup. They were close friends, and Komarov knew the ship was doomed. He told friends, "If I don't go on this mission, they will send Yura." He essentially flew the mission to save Gagarin's life, because he knew Gagarin would be sent in his place and would not refuse. That is just heartbreaking. There is a persistent rumor that on launch day, Gagarin showed up and tried to get into his own spacesuit to take Komarov's place, hoping officials would cancel the flawed mission if the national hero was in the seat. But they wouldn't let him near the rocket, so Komarov launched, and he died. Horribly. One of the solar panels didn't open. The ship had no power. On re-entry, the main parachute never came out. The capsule hit the ground near Orenburg at 140 kilometers per hour. Komarov was obliterated. There was almost nothing left. Gagarin had to listen to this happen on the radio. He was devastated. Now he became deeply bitter towards the political leadership. There is a story that he threw a drink in Brezhnev's face at a party afterwards. True or not, it hardened his resolve. He decided he had to master flight again. He would not be a passenger or a symbol anymore. He finally gets recertified to fly high-performance jets, which brings us to March 27th, 1968. A gloomy, overcast morning. Very low cloud cover. Gagarin is scheduled to take up a MiG-15 UTI, a two-seater trainer, with a very experienced instructor, Vladimir Seryozhin, a decorated war hero. It was supposed to be a routine weather check. They take off. They perform maneuvers. Gagarin radios back. Mission complete. Returning to base. And then, just nothing. Silence. They vanished from the radar. Ground crews searched for hours. They eventually found a fresh crater in the forest near the town of Kurzak. The plane had disintegrated on impact. They could only identify Gagarin's remains from a mole on his neck and the wallet in his flight jacket. He was just 34 years old. The immediate aftermath was utter confusion and conspiracy theories. He was drunk. He was kidnapped by aliens. The KGB assassinated him. He faked his death. The official report was classified top secret. But we know now what really happened. In 2013, Alexei Leonov, another famous cosmonaut and friend who was on the investigation committee, was finally given permission to speak the truth. It wasn't Gagarin's fault. It was gross air traffic control negligence. And Su-15 interceptor jet, a much larger and faster aircraft, was scheduled for a test flight that day. It was supposed to be at 10,000 meters. The pilot, whose name is still protected, went rogue. He dropped down below his assigned altitude into the thick cloud layer, right where Gagarin was flying, and he broke the sound barrier right next to them. He passed within 10 to 20 meters of Gagarin's little MiG at supersonic speed. We need to explain what wake turbulence is. It is not just a bit of wind. Imagine you are in a small rowboat on a perfectly calm lake. Now imagine a giant speedboat zooms past you, just inches away at full throttle. The massive wake it creates will flip your little rowboat over instantly. That is what happened in the air. The aerodynamic wash from the huge Su-15, combined with the shockwave of the sonic boom, violently flipped Gagarin's plane into a deep, flat spin. And because they were in those low, thick clouds, they had no visual reference. They did not know how close they were to the ground. They were completely disoriented. They fought the spin. The investigation of the wreckage showed they actually almost recovered from it. They pulled out of the final dive, but they were just 1 or 2 seconds too late. They hit the trees at full speed, killed by a reckless driver in the sky. After everything, he survived. The Nazis, the spinning Vostok, the crushing political pressure. He dies because someone else violated flight protocol. It is a tragic, senseless, and deeply frustrating end. But in a strange way, it also preserved his legend. He never got old. He never had to oversee the slow decline of the Soviet Union. He remains frozen in time at age 34 as that smiling, handsome pioneer. His legacy is undeniable. And what really gets me is that when Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed on the moon in July 1969, completing the race that Gagarin had started, they left something behind on the lunar surface. They left a small memorial satchel. It contained medals honoring fallen astronauts and cosmonauts. It had medals for Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee from the Apollo 1 fire. And it also contained medals for 2 Soviet cosmonauts, Vladimir Komarov and Yuri Gagarin. That image is powerful. The American flag is planted, and at the base of the lunar module lies a quiet tribute to the Russian peasant boy who went first. It is an acknowledgement that this endeavor, spaceflight, is not really American or Soviet. It is human. Gagarin broke the chain of gravity for all of us. Yuri's night is still celebrated every April 12th all over the world, even on Antarctica. So how do we synthesize this incredible life? We have the hero, the victim of fame, the icon. You have to view him as a man of almost superhuman adaptability, who was ultimately broken by rigidity. He adapted to living in a mud hut. He adapted to the foundry. He adapted to the G-forces of re-entry. But he could not adapt to being a living statue. The Soviet system tried so hard to protect their perfect symbol that they stripped him of his very purpose. And when they finally, reluctantly, let him fly again, the system's own incompetence is what killed him. Gagarin conquered the void of space, but he could not survive the political machine and the sheer weight of being a symbol back on Earth. Was it possible that being grounded, being turned into that museum piece, was the very thing that actually killed him in the end? It is a powerful question. That brings us to the end of this journey into the life of Yuri Gagarin. If this story of endurance and the stars resonated with you, launch your support by subscribing to the History Titans channel. We have so many more stories of the people who shaped our world waiting for you there. Thank you for listening, and keep looking up.